Hey everybody, it's Jeff, and in this video we'll cover tips for making the most of your Viking Antarctic expedition trip. Now for those of you who are following my Viking Antarctic expedition day-by-day video series, don't worry, I'm going to be back with day 10 soon, but I know that some of the folks who follow me here are preparing to go on an early November Antarctic expedition trip, so I wanted to get this full list of tips in your hands before you go, in case they might be helpful. One note, in some of these items I reference things that you may want to buy before the trip, so I'll include links to these items on Amazon in the show notes below. Now these are affiliate links, which means you won't pay any more for them, but a small amount of that price will go to supporting this channel, so I appreciate that. Okay, so lots of tips here. I'll try to go through them quickly. Let's get to it. Tip number one, lots of folks ask me in the comments, so here's what I use for my videos and photos. I just use a straight up Google Pixel 6 Pro phone for all of the pictures and most of the video that's on the ship. It's a great camera. It's got great software behind it. A bunch of little tricks. You can remove background stuff. I'm not much of a camera guy, so I don't own any professional cameras, so that works for me. And then on the video, most of the videos that I took off the ship, I use a camera that I got on Amazon called an Akaso V50X action camera. And it's basically a less expensive version of the GoPro series of action cameras. So I recorded most of my videos in 4K at 30 frames per second. The camera has amazing stabilization, but it doesn't do great when you zoom. When you zoom in with it and try to take video, it creates very pixelated videos that are pretty much useless. So the tip is with this camera, if you get it, don't zoom, just use it as a general view camera. Now I kept it in a waterproof case most of the time because I had it out on rib boats and special operations boats and I didn't want it to get wet or have any problems with that. But what that does do is it pretty much ruins the audio. The audio becomes very muted and you can't pick up on what people are saying. So that's a pro and con that probably would affect most of these action cameras. I also used a floatable hand grip on my action camera in case I dropped it overboard, and it also made it nice and easy to hold it. And that came with an accessory pack that I bought also on Amazon. I'll link to that. Next tip is make sure that you bring and take either bonine or some other kind of anti-nausea medicine if you have any kind of problems with that at all. We actually called our doctor in advance of the trip and talked to them and got prescribed to us Zofran, which is a prescription level anti-nausea medicine. I'm glad we did that. There were really, the problem is the crossing, or it can be the crossing. Once you get down in Antarctica, most of the cruising is nice and easy, and I didn't take anti-nausea medicine while we were down there, but I definitely took it on the way down, I took it on the way back, and we talked to various people who tried all kinds of different things, ear patches. I would say that I would definitely bring bonine and or Zofran or something along those lines and use them for your crossing days. Next tip is to make sure that every evening you read the Viking Daily. It should be laying on your bed when you come back in the evening from wandering around the ship and doing whatever you're doing. There's a lot of important information in there, notices, schedules for the next day, where you're supposed to meet, any special events that are going on the next day. It's a wealth of knowledge, and you definitely should spend like 5 minutes reading through it every night before you go to bed. My next tip would be to make sure you at least try all of the off-ship activities at least one time. So that would be kayaking, rib boat, special operations boat, and if it's available to you, hopefully the submarine. I would try them all at least one time if you can. Take advantage of this situation. Tip number 5, and we didn't do this ourselves, but I wish we had. Go to the place that they call the hide in the evening. It's kind of buried down low at the front of the ship. It's really neat. We talked to a number of people who went there in the evening, and apparently crews show up and tell like stories. It's pretty interesting. We didn't do it. I wish we had. You should do it. Next tip, along with reading the Viking Daily each evening, you should definitely go to the get together they call the Daily Briefing. It's usually early in the evening, and it's where they go over what happened that day on the ship. They talk about what's going to happen the next day on the ship. And the expedition ships, a little bit different than the sea or the river boats, because it's a little bit more flexible where they're going from day to day. So it is pretty important to go to the daily briefing so you know where you're going the next day usually, because it may not be where you planned on going the day before. And also they do a lot more of they do a lot of science on board, and this at the daily briefings is where they report on the science that they're doing, the penguin counts and the various other things that are going on the ship. So important to go. And following along with that tip, as soon as the daily briefing is over, that's when they release what groups everybody's going to be on for the next day for the kayaking, rib boat riding, special op boats, and the submarines. So right as the daily briefing is finishing up, you want to bring up your phone, bring up the Viking app on your phone, and that's when you'll get the notice, or you'll see what groups you're in. So if you need to make changes, or you need to cancel something, or you want to try to add something in, you can immediately go get that taken care of based upon what you see on your phone. All right, the next tip relates to the special op boat rides. A couple of tips here. One is that, as I've said in some of my videos, you get going pretty quick on those boats sometimes. They're open on the sides, so it's probably the coldest you're going to be, or at least it was for us. So on special op boats ride days, make sure you dress the warmest you can. Wear everything you can wear. I would recommend, even in addition to sock liners and thick socks, you might want to wear, and we did this sometimes, 3 pair of socks. Sock liners, a regular pair of socks, and a thick pair of socks. And you might even want to size up your boots for that one size just so you can do all that. And also another great tip on the special ops boats is to try to get a seat near the front of it, as close to the front as you can, right behind the pilot, because A, it's better views, you're not having to look through people, and B, there's a windscreen in the front, so it's a little less spray coming in on you than there would be if you sit further back, especially if it's in choppy weather. So that's my tip there. Next tip, related to the making sure you bring a lot of sock liners and socks and thick socks, is to at least bring a pair of glove liners and a good pair of gloves. I recommend the glove liners and the gloves that they have in the Viking has, you get from their store. Those are really good ones, and we liked them a lot. The gloves are kind of nice. They actually clip together with a little clip, and that comes in handy in a minute in another tip I'm going to give you. The next tip is to, when you're going on expeditions off the trip or excursions, make sure you keep your room key accessible. And what I recommend is there's a little pocket in the front of the red Viking waterproof jacket that you can tuck it in, because once you get gloves on and all that stuff, it's kind of hard to get that key in and out of your pocket, and you need to scan in and out when you go on and off the ship with the little scanner as you walk off. So you'll need access to it, but you don't want to lose it. So that little pocket, as I recall, actually might zip shut. And related to that, don't put your hat or gloves on until the last minute when you're disembarking off the ship onto either a rib boat or a special ops boat, because it'll get pretty warm sitting around the ship, and it also makes it easier to do things like get your key card out and things like that. And as I was mentioning before, the gloves that the Viking recommends that you get actually clip together, and you'll see here how I've clipped them together and kind of hooked them over the bottom strap of my life preserver, just to have really easy access to them, and so I don't lose them instead of trying to stick them in my pockets. Next tip, and we use this sometimes and sometimes we didn't, but we definitely got a waterproof floatable pouch for our phone. It can make it slightly more difficult to use the phone, but you definitely have to take your gloves off and things to use your phone. But you can use the phone through the pouch, but it's just slightly more difficult, so sometimes we didn't use it. But I did hear a horror story of somebody losing their phone on a kayak trip by just dropping it overboard, and that's the end of that at that point. So consider bringing it. Next tip, when you're going on definitely rib boat rides and maybe even kayaks and special op boats, bring the binoculars that come in your room with you. Just throw them around your neck. They're not that heavy or big, and it can come in really handy looking at things off in a distance, especially if you're on the rib boat rides. All right, moving into the room. These are the outlets that are next to the bed on each side, so it's a pretty good selection of things. You can even see they have a USB there, USB-C and a USB regular. If you have a lot of things to charge, like a phone and a camera and a tablet and all kinds of things going on, you may actually want to bring a multi-USB outlet adapter. We did that to plug into the power, and it can give you both power and additional USB outlets. It's up to you, depends on how many gadgets you have with you. And then the next thing in the room, anytime you come back from a rib boat ride, a special op boat ride, a kayak ride, anything like that where you've been out in the weather, take your coat, your boots, all that outerwear, your pants, and stick it in the drying closet. Those things are amazing. They're going to dry off your clothes much quicker than just kind of leaving them sitting out, so make sure you use that. Another thing in the room, and we did not find this out until probably 8 days into the trip, is that there is a secret hidden coffee maker, which they kind of tuck away down here. I didn't get a picture of it, I don't think, but it's in this cabinet right here. And it would have been nice to be able to make some coffee in the morning without having to get completely dressed and go up to the cafe there. The next two tips I have are related to some websites that might be helpful for you. This first one is Cruise Mapper, and this is a website that lets you track any ship basically in the world, but you can specifically narrow it down and see where your ship is. And this is kind of nice. Even in the weeks leading up to your cruise, you can kind of track where your ship is and see. And then if you don't have a good feel for where you are in the greater scheme of things, you can pull this website up anytime during your cruise and see exactly where your ship is. You also have the channel on the TV that will show you where you are on the map, but this is kind of a neat thing you can use before you even get on the cruise. So that's cruisemapper.com, and then you just filter it down by picking Viking cruises, and you'll see either the Polaris or the Octantis on there. The next website is also really neat. I think Viking must have teamed up with Panamax, because the website is viking.panamax.com/Octantis, or I assume /Polaris. And what that does is show you a fairly live, it's within the past couple of minutes, 360-degree panable view of a camera from the top of the ship. So you can see, again, this is kind of neat to see what's going on in the week or two leading up to your cruise, or even if you're sitting in your room and you can only see on the TV, you can only see that front-facing camera. This one lets you see all the way around the ship, so kind of neat. Related to that, internet access, I've talked about this. It's pretty good considering we're in Antarctica. During the crossing, I would say, is when you're going to have the most downtime, because you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But once you get to Antarctica, we had very few problems with internet. It's not like it's super duper fast. I don't think you're going to be streaming Netflix on it, but you can definitely send emails, text messages. If you want to push your images to the cloud, you can do that at night. So it worked out pretty well. I was impressed. So that's all I can think of for now. Hopefully that's been helpful for those of you who are planning an Antarctic Viking expedition. You are absolutely going to love the trip. I know you are. I'll see everybody soon with the Day 10 video. Thank you very much.